Hello and welcome to the Norfolk Historical Society. I'm Barry Weber, Executive Director. Today we're going to take you on a tour of our exhibition, The Extraordinary Legacy, the photographs of Marie Kendall. So let me tell you a little bit about Marie Kendall, who she was, where she came from. Marie was born in the Alsace region of France in 1854. Her family, after the Franco-Prussian War, immigrated to the United States in 1871, arriving in New York City. Upon her arrival, Marie was 18 years old at that time. She requested from her family that she lead an independent life if she would come and immigrate with them, which she did. Immediately, she and her sister signed up for the Bellevue Hospital training program for nurses. It was a newly developed program at Bellevue, and Marie jumped right in. It was at Bellevue that she met her future husband. He was an intern there, John Calvin Kendall. Kendall was a native from Ridgefield, Connecticut, and had studied to be a doctor at Yale and Columbia Medical. According to the rules of Bellevue, or at least through the Kendall family lore, the doctors and nurses were not allowed to intermingle. So Kendall had to leave the nurses training program because she married John Kendall in 1877. Soon thereafter, the Kendalls set up home in Norwalk, Connecticut. By 1880, the Kendalls started their family. They had 3 children in a rather rapid succession starting in 1880. Unfortunately, the eldest Kendall child, Carolina, was involved in a terrible scalding accident and died shortly thereafter, just before her 2nd birthday. This tragedy affected Marie greatly. She had but one professional image of baby Carolina. So at Bellevue, one of John Kendall's colleagues was William Henry Welch. William Henry Welch had been a classmate of John's as well at Yale. William Henry Welch was from a long line of doctors who originated from Norfolk, Connecticut. Somewhere along the line, it was through William Henry Welch that the Kendalls were introduced to his father, William Wickham Welch, who was the beloved local doctor here in Norfolk. It was at that time John was offered to join the practice of William Wickham Welch and take over for him, as he was soon to retire as the local doctor. So this is how the Kendalls came to Norfolk. When the Kendalls arrived in Norfolk with their 3 children, they'd only had but these 3 studio photographs that they had taken in Norwalk. With the death of Carolina, and this made Marie want to make sure she had more photographs of her children. It was at this point that she saved up money from her sewing, and she bought herself a camera. She worked with a view camera. It was an 8x10 view camera that took a glass plate negative. And it was at this point she started taking all these wonderful photographs of her own children. She was so successful with many of these photographs that the people in Norfolk started to notice her work and requested photographs of their own children. So, wanting more photographs of her children, Marie thought of creative ways to take their photograph, not just a regular old studio portrait. First, she didn't really have a studio, so she was working often in the great outdoors or inside the home. Here, in this enlargement behind me, she's done a wonderful composition with the 3 children. The photograph is entitled "Writing a Letter to Grandfather." You can see in the lower left-hand corner of the photograph that she's included a box with the name Lena on it. This signifies the child who had died, yet she's still part of the family photograph. In this pair of photographs, Kendall used a flash, which she had purchased for $100, kind of an expense for equipment at that time, but it allowed her to take some of these interesting photographs. Here we see these 2 pictures which are taken, one on top was entitled "The Day After Christmas." And you can see the children's toys are all on display in here. and she's arranged the family in a setting and used the flash. You can see she's carefully closed all the window blinds so that the flash isn't seen in the glass. Other creative photographs that Kendall did often included the great outdoors. Here you see her 3 children with their family pet sheep pulling a sleigh. Notice in the right-hand side of the photograph, there's a snowman in the background, and you can see her French influence coming in. The snowman is wearing a tri-cornered hat. Another group of creative photographs Kendall produced with her children were as a gift for her husband. It was his birthday. So these photographs were taken March 11th, 1890. She set the children up posing as though they were doctors. So in the top photograph, they're setting a cast on poor little Claude's foot. In the middle photograph, they're all performing different tasks that one would see at a hospital. And in the lower photograph, the children are writing a message to Papa. What's fascinating about this photograph is that the interior shot she's taken captures 2 of her windows. And if you look closely at these images, you'll see glass plates hanging in the window. These are not negatives, these are positives printed on glass. We only knew about these because of the photograph. An exciting event that happened with the exhibit open is a friend came along and said, "Oh, I have one of these photographs," and has brought it to us to display. And here it is here. So this is a rare positive image printed on glass. We've of course lit this from behind so you can see it in the exhibition. In 1899, the Kendalls had their 5th child. They named this child after the first daughter who had died, so she was Carolina Weber Kendall as well. This baby became known as Kay. Marie Kendall worked with a view camera, as you can see one on display here. This is not Kendall's actual camera, but a similar type of camera that she would have used. You can see they're rather bulky. They would have taken a glass plate negative. You can see the box also on display here would have contained 12 glass plates in there, and there's a developed negative in the center of this shot as well. The view camera, if you're not familiar with the process, takes a slide in the back, and that's over on the left-hand side of the shot here. And this would have been loaded with the glass plates, put into the back of the camera. Once you've set your image in the field glass, that's when we see the photographers with the hood over their head. They're looking at the image, which of course is shown to them upside down, and it would be in full color. Now, of course, she was photographing in black and white, so she had to adjust her thinking as she was looking at a beautiful farm scene, cows grazing on green grass, as to what it would look like in black and white. The other thing we have to imagine or remember about Marie Kendall photographing in this time period of 1880, 1890, not only did she have equipment that weighed over 40 pounds that she had to move around, but she would have been dressed in something similar to this outfit you see represented here. Several layers of skirts, heavy boots, undergarments, and of course what we're showing is actually a revolution for women in what was known as the shirtwaist. In this wonderful photograph, the Kendalls have traveled to New York City. Again, camera in hand. Here she's set the family up on the Bethesda fountain. You can see them down here on the rim in the right-hand side of the photograph. The view camera that Kendall was using, and perhaps the lens, which we don't have access to that information, were able to capture great detail on these glass plate negatives. You can see from this enlargement, we can actually read what is written on the chalkboard describing all the aquatic plants that are in the fountain for blooming that afternoon. By the 1890s, Kendall had produced so much work, and to great acclaim, that she decided to submit these 3 framed photo montages of her work to the World's Columbian Exposition, which happened in 1893. Word went out to all states to have people submit their works of art, their products, and so forth for display at the Columbian Exposition. Kendall's work hung in the Woman's Pavilion at the Columbian Exposition. This was something very new for the World's Fair, to be showcasing women independently. Kendall won an award, which you see in the lower right, for her photographs. She was the only woman to receive an award for her photography. Of note, by the judges, were several of Kendall's photographs. One, the fact that she was able to capture a moving train. The second was her detailed shot of the trailing arbutus. And the third was her collection of what the judges termed child life. It's in this great montage that you see Kendall's extensive work with her triplicate photography. The multiple photographs that Kendall was so fond of, as you can see represented here, were done using one glass plate negative. She'd create a background, black background and a black floor, pin out the location of the sitter, in this case, these adorable dogs. These are actually twin dogs. And she would pose them in 3 different locations, each time exposing the one negative. Kendall was also fond of photographing animals. Here we see a collection of orphaned pigs warming themselves by the wash house stove. The little grouping of photos below is daughter Kay feeding the little piglets. When the Kendalls first arrived in Norfolk in 1884, they lived in one of the Welch homes, the one you see pictured here. By 1893, the same year Marie had submitted all of her works to the Columbian Exposition, the Kendalls were in the process of building their own house on Grant Street. Here you see these wonderful photographs of the Grant Street home. One of the more exciting things that's happened to us here at the Norfolk Historical Society while we were in the middle of working on this exhibition and our book, which accompanies it, was that we were contacted by one of Kendall's surviving grandchildren. Her name was Margaret Donovan, and she came to us through a friend who had sent us an email saying his friend and neighbor had this wonderful collection of Marie Kendall photographs and memorabilia, and would we be interested? We were so excited to receive this phone call right in the middle of producing this exhibition, which we've been wanting to do for years. The bulk of our collection from Kendall has been with us since about the 1960s. So to have an addition of new and never before seen material to present was beyond belief. One of the great mysteries for us in studying our collection in all these years was this annotated photograph that Kendall had written on, and in it she refers to a little dormer that was put on her home, which was turned into a boarding house, where her skylight used to be. Well, when you look at this picture, you just can't imagine where a skylight would be on this building and how it would have worked. So one of the great treasures in the granddaughter's collection was this other photograph of the home just after its completion in 1893. When you look closely, you can see the 3 Kendall children are all seated around the property on the porch, each one with their favorite pet sheep. And here in the corner, you can see Marie's skylight and big studio window. Along with Marie's photography business, she also ran a sewing school. She gave lessons on nutrition to the local women and families. But the Kendalls also ran a boarding house. It was called Edgewood Lodge. Here you can see a wonderful detail of the veranda. What's most fun about this picture for us is as we look through Marie's various portraiture, we find all of her props are actually sitting on this porch. So the scale, for instance, and all the oriental rugs, and the various chairs that are pictured here on the porch all appear in other photographs. So Kendall set about also photographing the town, buildings, as they were going up. So here we have two wonderful photographs that she took as the Battelle Chapel was being erected. The Norfolk Library, these were all built around 1888, 1889. Kendall also had a wonderful way of capturing the great landscape. Here, Kendall has enlarged this photograph to a format which we really don't know how she was able to achieve these large-scale prints. And right next to it, you can see she printed the same photograph as a postcard. Kendall loved capturing the great natural events that occurred. A wonderful series of photographs she took of the great blizzard of 1888, which began on March 12th. And the snow fell for days and days, dropping about 6 feet of snow with high winds, which created drifts up to 24 feet high. Marie traveled far and wide to get her photographs. Here she takes her dog out to Tipping Rock. Back in town, she would go into places like the village blacksmith. And here she's used her flash camera again, or flash machine as she refers to it. And it's interesting to note that she's brought a white horse into the picture. The white horse, of course, would reflect the flash much more effectively than a dark-colored horse would have. Kendall's commercial work was extensive. She was hired by the railroad to photograph locations that the trains went, as seen in these wonderful shots of Poughkeepsie Bridge. In 1900, she produced this volume called Glimpses of Norfolk. It's pictures and collages, summer homes of all the residents of the time period. She took the idea from the glimpses of the World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition, which she obviously had seen. So the idea had been planted in her head, and she ended up producing her own version for the town of Norfolk. She did the same for John Kendall's hometown of Ridgefield. Her photographs were also used extensively in the Chrissy History of Norfolk. It's a large 500-plus page volume book detailing the history of the town. In the back of the volume, Mr. Chrissy thanks Kendall for her contributions and how she has brought the town into the current century. Postcards were also a great part of her work, as you can see on this wonderful display. This is just a fraction of the postcard images that Kendall produced. She was also hired by the colonial dames in about 1900, or the early 1900s, to photograph all the colonial homes that were here in Norfolk. Included in here is this wonderful picture, the first photograph we think Kendall took in Norfolk of the Robbins homestead. This one dates from the 1894s, so one of her earliest photographs taken here in Norfolk. So Marie Kendall photographed extensively through her lifetime here in Norfolk and recorded so many wonderful events, buildings, people, and the natural occurring weather events that we've seen. In fact, in one of her letters, one of the few letters that we have from Kendall, she refers to the process where she has stopped photographing and she's culling through her photographs. At one point, she destroys over 30,000 glass plate negatives. She was able to sell the glass for a penny apiece. This was post-World War I. So to be able to get the $300 to help her income was a benefit for her. And she probably destroyed the images that she knew wouldn't have any real pertinence later on. She saved over 500 glass plate negatives, which we do have here in the Norfolk Historical Society archives. I'm standing in front of one of my favorite Marie Kendall photographs. It was taken at the Norfolk Downs. It was the public golf course that the Eldridge sisters built and presented to the town for the people of Norfolk to play golf. And it was beautifully landscaped. And here Kendall has captured this wonderful copse of birches. There are so many more photographs that we could show you today. They're so extensive. We have, again, over 3,000 images in our collection in print form and the hundreds of glass plate negatives. So many that we've decided that really Kendall deserved a book. So that was our main thrust of this project. Thank you for joining us as we took a look at the remarkable legacy of Marie Hartig Kendall.